Good afternoon. Today we're going to visit a little bit about Multimin 90 and about preventing disease in utilizing the product. I'm Dr Havenga. I manage the Multimin company out of Fort Collins, Colorado. And I think one of the biggest questions we often get with utilizing the injectable is, why do we put the injectable on top of an oral protocol if the oral protocols really work well? And one of the key reasons for making the injectable available to supplement or complement oral programs is because of the poor absorption rates of these trace minerals out of the oral protocols. If we look at copper, the data out there supports that about 4 to 6% of copper that we feed orally, depending on which salt we utilize, is actually being absorbed into the animal. So more than 90% of the copper that we put in a ration will actually be excreted or come out the back side of a bovine. If we look at zinc, zinc is a little more efficient. We look at about 30% of zinc that we feed is absorbed by the animals, but still we're going to see more than 50% of zinc that we feed orally is going to come out the backside. The same holds true with selenium. Manganese is actually significantly worse because with manganese we have less than 2% of manganese that we feed orally gets absorbed. So very often you'll get more than 95% of the manganese that you feed orally gets excreted. Now with the injectable we bypass the oral constraint and we inject it subcutaneously, so the total component of what you've injected goes into the bloodstream, and from there it'll be metabolized and utilized. So it's a little more efficient way of getting trace mineral in there, and we'd like to offer that option when we construct or put together a trace mineral supplement program. But let's talk a little bit about the immune system. And I think it's very pertinent that we review the immune system and just focus on how the immune system is put together and how it works. So basically, if we look at the immune system or immunity in any mammal, whether we talk about humans or cattle, these principles all hold true. The immune system basically has two legs that it stands on. The first leg is the innate immune system, and that is something which people very often overlook because we've come to rely so heavily on vaccination. If we look at the innate immune system, those are the white blood cells that each animal or each baby is born with. These are the first things which are going to help us when we get challenged by something which is foreign, whether it's pollen, whether it's a flu virus, whether it's bacteria. This is the first line of defense, and the trace minerals play a key role in how these cells of the innate immune system function and operate. The acquired immune system is a second leg because it has memory, which the innate immune system does not have. And that is why we can employ a vaccine in the acquired immune system, because once we have exposed the body to a vaccine which mimics the bug that we want to protect against, they will actually, when they get exposed to that bug eventually, they will actually respond much quicker because they've already been exposed to it. They have certain chemicals and certain cells that are primed to act and bind and destroy these bugs. Now, unfortunately, this whole immune system is at the mercy of a bunch of other things. And if we look at it, plane of nutrition is key. Unfortunately, if we have an animal that does not have enough energy or protein, the animal will basically fight for survival, and the immune system is going to get no protein and no energy. So a thin, scrawny animal that has been neglected is going to be prone to get sick quicker than an animal on an adequate plane of nutrition. If we look at stress, that is critical. We see that in humans as well. If we put a calf on a truck and we ship it for 10 hours, that is a huge stress on that calf. Or if we wean a calf and we pull it off a cow and all of a sudden it gets moved to a sale barn, it's a new environment, now it's got to get away from milk, it's got to eat grass, that is a huge stress on those animals. And unfortunately, whenever we stress an animal or a human, we have a bunch of cortisol that's released, and cortisol shuts down this immune system. So to take a vaccine and inject an animal that just gets off a truck, you're going to get nothing for your money because that animal's immune system is shut off by the cortisol. And lastly, we need to look at challenge, because if I give you just one flu virus your body will deal with it very efficiently and you will not get sick. However, if a guy sneezes on you and he gives you 100 million flu viruses, your body may be overwhelmed and you may just get sick. So challenge is key. If we look at a cow-calf operation and we look at the calving paddocks, wherever we have a congregation of bunches of animals, that's where we're going to have challenge, because animals bring bugs with them. The same with the sale barn. We have bunches of cattle, bunches of calves that come from different areas, and they all commingle and they all share their bugs. It's just like kindergarten. They all share it, and that's just how it works. So this is just to put the immune system and how it is all put together in a little bit of perspective. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first start and focus on the innate immune system, where every calf is born with a system. But I want to review quickly how it works and then how the actual trace minerals play into this deal. So this is an atrocious slide because it shows a bunch of data, but I'm going to explain it a little more carefully with a video. All white blood cells that we are born with have 3 or 4 functions with regards to clearing a bug out of the body. So basically they have to do 3 things. The actual white blood cell, be it neutrophil or macrophage, needs to move to where the bug is. It needs to get there because this is a physical attack. So they need to get there. Now, unfortunately, this movement to the site of infection is regulated by the selenium status of the animal. Because I'll show you a video just now. This white blood cell has got to travel through the blood vessel to the site of infection, go through the blood vessel, and then into the site of infection. And if we do not have enough selenium, unfortunately, they will not leave the blood vessel. So they will go to where they need to fight, but they're going to sit in the vehicle. They're not going to get out. Once they then move through that tissue to get to the bug, they're actually going to eat that bug. So they need to phagocytose that bug. They need to eat it and make it part of that cell. And that phagocytosis or eating event is governed by copper. So if we do not have enough copper in that animal, we might get them to the site of infection, but they're just not going to eat enough of those bugs. They're going to leave a bunch of them outside, and they'll replicate, and it'll just perpetuate the disease. Now, once they've eaten them, they need to kill them. And basically, we have this massive respiratory burst where we have enzymes that are released in this white blood cell, which will basically digest the bacteria or viruses. And this whole digestion process needs to be switched off after it's been switched on. Because if we don't switch it off, it'll eventually destroy this whole white blood cell. It'll actually auto-digest and it'll blow it apart. So to basically shut down this digestive process, we need copper, zinc, and selenium via superoxide dismutase and glutathione peroxidase to take these digestive enzymes and turn it into water. So we need copper, zinc, and selenium. So you can see that the 3 key trace minerals for us in the innate immune system is going to be selenium, copper, and zinc. So just to explain how does this work, I have these 2 videos. The first one up top is basically how these white blood cells get to the site of infection. So here we have a neutrophil. It's basically traveling down a blood vessel, and they circulate through the body on a daily basis. However, once they get close to the site of infection, you'll see that they start adhering to the wall. They start slowing down. They're not running in the juice anymore. They're sitting on the walls, and they are moving much slower. And eventually, they will congregate, and you'll see a bunch of them sitting on the edge of these blood vessels, and eventually they will actually start crawling through that blood vessel, and you'll find them in tissue. And these 2 that are crawling in tandem here, they're looking for bacteria or viruses, and they're going to find them, and they're actually going to attempt to eat them. So eventually, they need to move into the tissue to actually be of any use for us. So if we look at it a little bit more graphically, here we have the neutrophil, which is circulating. Eventually, when there is an attack in tissue, the tissue will send chemical messengers to the blood vessel, and those chemical messengers will start protruding on the inside, and they will let these white blood cells know, listen, you got to slow down. You got to park here, and we need your help on the outside of this blood vessel. So once they attach to the blood vessel, they will actually start secreting a bunch of chemicals, which is going to make this blood vessel susceptible to actually open up a little bit. And once those endothelial cells relax a little bit, it'll create a small micro gap, and this white blood vessel, or this white blood cell, is actually going to climb right through that gap to enter the tissue. Now, the unfortunate thing is this slipping through that endothelial cells does not happen in the presence of a selenium deficiency. So yes, we have enough white blood cells. They can move to where they need to be, but unfortunately they get stuck in the actual blood vessel, and they don't go to the actual site of where these bugs are. So if we have enough selenium, they're going and they will find these pathogens, and they will actually stop, and then they need to perform a second function. So on the second little video, basically what they will do is they will completely ingest that pathogen. They will eat it, and it will be part of the inside of that cell. And once they've eaten it, they will then release digestive juices which will actually destroy that, and that's when we need to be able to switch it off, because otherwise they will destroy themselves, and we may have a problem where we run out of white blood cells if they destroy themselves and we don't have enough of them to actually fight that infection. So just to recap, we need them to get to the site of infection, which is selenium driven. We need them to phagocytose or eat them, which is copper driven, and then we need them to destroy but not destroy themselves, and that protection comes from copper, zinc, and selenium. Now, if we move over to the other side of the immune system and we look at the actual active immune system, where we can employ a vaccine to actually prime these animals and protect them a little better, we had a lot of people ask, well, does Multimin contribute, or doesn't it contribute to the way that these animals handle vaccines? So we ran a study with the University of Florida where we looked at recently weaned beef calves, and we gave them a modified live viral vaccine, which is very common, to protect them against respiratory disease and some of the reproductive diseases. And basically what we did is we pre-screened these cattle to make sure that, number one, they were not deficient in any of the trace minerals. So they were not deficient in zinc, copper, selenium, and manganese. We put them on a full NRC diet, so they had plenty of access to these trace minerals, so they were never made deficient. And then we divided them into 3 groups. We had one group of 15 calves that were kept just to make sure we don't get field virus in there. And we had 42 calves that got a modified live virus vaccine by itself. And we had another 42 calves that got the modified live virus plus Multimin. And all of these calves were seronegative to IBR and BVD1 and BVD2. So we wanted to see on those 3 viruses what the response would be if we gave the Multimin the same day as the vaccine. And we tracked them out for a 90-day window. Now, with regards to BVD1 and BVD2, we saw absolutely no difference in the way that those calves utilized the vaccine and how they produced antibody against those viruses. But with regards to IBR, we saw a very positive response, and I will show that to you now. However, at the same time, if you read literature, everybody will make a comment that when you vaccinate cattle, it's good to make sure that the trace mineral status of those animals is at least good. It should never be deficient. But there is virtually no data to show how a vaccine changes trace mineral patterns within an animal. So that was the second component to this study. So basically what we did is we bled all of these animals again on day 0 when we gave the vaccine, or the vaccine and Multimin, and we bled them again 2 weeks later to look at mineral status from a blood point of view. So this is the copper levels within these animals. So basically what you can see is this is the group that just got the vaccine. This is the group that got the vaccine plus Multimin. So basically after 2 weeks you can see that the coppers dropped a little bit. It wasn't statistically significant. However, on the Multimin group we were able to elevate their copper status. If we look at the manganese, none of them were statistically significant, although there was a little bit of a drop in the just vaccinated group. With regards to selenium, it was a little more interesting because from day of vaccination to 2 weeks after vaccination, there was a statistically significant drop in the control group, and there was a statistically significant increase in the Multimin group. Now, why is this important? Because selenium is one of the key minerals that we utilize when we breed cattle. So if we stick a cow with a vaccine the day before we put the bulls in and we create this problem, she is not going to perform well in that breeding season because we've just reduced her selenium status. If we look at zinc, it was even more marked. You can see with zinc in the group that was just vaccinated, again you can see a dramatic drop in zinc, and that is to be expected because if we look at zinc, when we talk about viral pathogens, zinc is critical because the zinc plays a role in so many different enzymatic actions that when we get viral exposure, zinc is utilized in about 300 enzyme systems to drive this immune response. So you can see that by giving the Multimin again, we did not quite prevent that drop, but at least we ended up with statistically significantly different groups of animals here. So again, from a zinc point of view, it's not smart to vaccinate and immediately want to breed these animals. So for the first time, we were able to actually show that if you put a modified live virus into an animal, they actually do make use of these trace minerals. And this is just the IBR, or bovine herpes virus 1 data. Basically what we saw by giving the Multimin and the vaccine on the same day, if you look at the control animals, they responded a little bit slower, and their humoral antibody response, was significantly lower than the Multimin group as soon as day 14, riding it all the way out to day 60. So what we can tell you is if you give Multimin in an animal that's not deficient, at the same time you give a modified live vaccine, you'll get two different benefits. You'll get, number one, you're going to change and make that animal better from a trace mineral point of view. It's going to have a higher mineral status than the animals that did not get Multimin the day they were vaccinated. And secondly, if IBR is really important for you, like in feedlot cattle or stocker cattle, or even in some of the reproductive programs, if we want to avoid IBR infections, at least for 60 days after you vaccinate it, you're going to have more antibody that can mop up virus in those animals compared to animals that did not get Multimin. Now, following on this, we had a request to explore inactivated or killed product because the modified live virus perpetuates itself, but we also had a request to provide some data to explore what happens in an animal that is supplied with a fixed dose of antigen. A killed product, which we know there's X number of bacteria or virus in there, and does it help there or doesn't it help there? And we worked with the University of Florida yet again. We used porcine red blood cell because it is foreign to cattle. It is something which we can count and we can make sure that each individual animal gets exactly the same amount of antigen, and we saw exactly the same profile as with the modified live. In this killed model, you can see that again we had a quicker response, and again we had statistically significantly more antibody being produced. And especially when we look at the first time that we inject an animal with a killed vaccine, that first injection is critical because it produces memory, and if it works really well, when we give a booster, we have really good protection. So from a primary vaccination point of view, there is no data contradicting the co-use of Multimin and a killed vaccine either. So when we look at this contribution that minerals make to both the innate and the acquired immune response, what does that relate to when we talk about benefit to the producer? We actually ran two studies, one at Oklahoma State University and one at the University of Arkansas, to look at these high-stress cattle, both male and female, and we basically had a vaccination protocol, a metaphylactic antibiotic in there, and we just wanted to see if we put Multimin in with their vaccination protocol the day of processing, whether we would get any benefit just looking at the health and performance of these cattle. And in both studies, we saw a couple of different benefits. The first benefit was the number of cattle that got sick with respiratory disease was decreased significantly. In the University of Arkansas study, you can see that also on animals that were treated twice was actually reduced significantly as well. And you can see that 50% reduction there. You can see the 50% reduction in number of animals treated twice as well. Now, because we have a population of cattle that is a little healthier than the controls, we also saw some performance benefits where we saw average daily gain was up with the Multimin group, and we also made these animals a little more efficient. They were not utilizing as much feed to gain at that, to add a pound of beef. So basically what we've shown is, yes, although we have some background data to support it makes the vaccine work better, if we look at what it translates to from an animal production point of view, it relates into healthier cattle, less treatments, and a little better performance. And in the end, that's what we need to provide a decent steak.